Hi, I'm Marguerite from MoveToTacoma.com, and I'm here today with Erin, and we're going to talk about living in Tacoma versus living in Gig Harbor. Some people don't know which one they want, so let's talk about the differences.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you asked me to talk about this subject today because it is something that I kind of pride myself on, that I feel very comfortable and familiar with both sides of the bridge. And so I work with clients a lot that are in that scenario where we're looking in Tacoma and Gig Harbor both.
When you personally, you grew up in Tacoma and now you live in Gig Harbor, so
Right.
You've lived both and you can speak to that.
Yep. And I still like to think of myself as living in both communities. Even though I reside in Gig Harbor, I still live life in Tacoma as well. And we'll buzz over the bridge for dinner, or my office is in Tacoma. So that bridge isn't a barrier like it is to some for me.
That's awesome. So let's talk about differences in price, differences in architecture and community, differences in commute times. Like, let's cover it all. Like, when you're comparing Tacoma and Gig Harbor with clients, like, what are the differences in price points?
So our average price or median price in Gig Harbor right now is $800, which is significantly higher than the Tacoma side of the bridge. But something I always like people to realize is we do have a lot of large estates.
Yeah.
And so those are higher price homes that are pulling that median price up.
That makes sense.
And so I just want to make sure that people know, like, you can find something for most price ranges. I don't know. It's a challenge out there for anyone finding real affordable housing. That's the truth, but
median in Gig Harbor is 800-ish. In Tacoma at large, I think it's about 500 right now, but that varies from neighborhood to neighborhood, right? If you're in Stadium District, it's almost $1 million. If you're in South Tacoma, it's like 450. So there's quite a bit of variety within Tacoma, and you're saying that variety does exist in Gig Harbor
the variety
as well.
does exist. So from the Narrows Bridge to the Purdy Bridge, our median price is 800. When you cross the Purdy Bridge into Key Peninsula, which the address is still technically in a lot of those areas, Gig Harbor, the median price is closer to 450.
Okay. So if you're looking for something affordable, but you want to be in the Gig Harbor area, there are opportunities.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah. That said, it is sort of like, it's a higher end suburb, basically.
Yeah.
So as far as like the way you live there versus the way you lived growing up, like, what do you think is the difference as far as like types of homes, architecture, and the way you live in community?
Well, okay, so for me to get to the grocery store,
You're in Artondale.
I'm in Artondale, which is near Artondale Elementary, not far from Fox Island. And it takes me at least 10 to 15 minutes to get to the grocery store. So when you're living in Tacoma, you probably have a store. In some areas it might take you 10 minutes because of traffic.
Yeah.
But for me, it's 10 to 15 minutes because of distance.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that, but we have what's kind of common, we'll have like little mini marts in different neighborhoods.
Like the country store.
Yeah, kind of like the country store. So yeah, if you just need milk or eggs or something, you can maybe grab something closer. But so that's, for some people, something I like to make sure they're aware of. So.
Yeah, because in Tacoma, it's like we have business districts, and it's almost like these little neighborhoods, like little towns within the town, right?
Exactly.
And in Gig Harbor, it's more like wide open spaces.
Yeah.
So thinking about the types of homes that are available, when I think Tacoma, I think predominantly historic, like Craftsman's, Victorians, lots of older homes, and smaller generally, compared to Gig Harbor, where you're going to have, new construction, housing developments, and yeah, like you say, some mansions on the water. So there's, I think like that's a difference in just the architectural style.
Yeah, so most of the historic homes that you find in Gig Harbor are going to be in the downtown Gig Harbor area.
Right.
And then outside of that, depending on the subdivision or the neighborhood you're in, you might be an area where you have a lot of split levels because they were developed in the 70s, or a lot of developments came in the 90s, and so you'll have some of those traditional two-story homes. And then more recently, within the last 15, maybe almost 20 years, the newer construction where you have the smaller lot sizes have started popping up, where we have those types of developments, Gig Harbor North, where the Costco and Target and Home Depot and all of those things are. So that's, that's newer in my opinion. Like they never really had that kind of subdivision in Gig Harbor before, where you still have your neighborhoods, but typically they're larger lot sizes. Aside from that, those areas.
So speaking to that, I mean, recognizing that there are different kinds of neighborhoods within Gig Harbor and different kinds of planned communities, what do you think the difference is in the experience of how you grew up growing up in Tacoma in that kind of city of neighborhoods versus your kids growing up in Gig Harbor and Artondale? Like, what is the difference? How does it live differently?
Okay, so we don't have a ton of sidewalks out in Gig Harbor,
Yeah.
so just like and being able to maybe walk to the stores, or obviously when you live that far away, so that's a difference. We don't have a lot of streetlights. Like it is a little bit more rural, and so
Darker.
So yeah, it's darker, and then it's not necessarily as culturally diverse, and your friends from school, like my kids' friends, they might live rather than just a few blocks away, 5 to 10 minutes in a car ride, even though they go to the same school.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Just more spread out.
Yeah, so that kind of changes some things too.
I grew up in a suburb, and it was like, a lot of you have to always getting rides to school or catching the bus to school, and like you're not really walking anywhere or riding your bike anywhere.
Yeah, like
whereas growing up in Tacoma, you might be doing those things.
Exactly. Like I remember walking myself to my baseball practice.
Right.
And we carpool a lot out in the Gig Harbor area because, it can be a good distance to the ball field.
So what about the things that you get no matter where you live? I mean, I'm thinking of like access to water. Tacoma neighborhoods and Gig Harbor neighborhoods both have access to great parks, waterfront, beaches. What else is the same, do you think? What don't you lose no matter which choice you make?
I think both have really great sense of community. Even though Gig Harbor's more spread out, the community's still strong.
Yeah.
And there for each other. And then Tacoma's definitely that way. I think you said it earlier, maybe that it's like small towns within each little neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So you still have a great sense of community no matter which side of the bridge you choose.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you would want someone who's considering looking at Tacoma, looking at Gig Harbor, anything for them to think about?
I guess maybe commute. If you're a commuter, that's probably something. My husband does commute, and you can live out in the harbor. It's just a little less optimal for some people.
Right, because you just have a little bit more of a drive time. So your husband commutes to
Seattle.
And how long does that take in the car during rush hour?
Well, it can take, rush hour.
He tries to avoid the rush hour.
Yeah, he does. He does avoid the rush hour. So I would say it can take about an hour to maybe an hour and a half on a bad day.
Yeah.
But he goes early in the morning, and it takes him 45 minutes.
That's great.
And he catches a bus right from Gig Harbor if he wants to. He actually chooses to drive into Tacoma to take the bus from there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because it's just a little bit more flexible.
Yeah.
We don't have as many buses that run out of the harbor.
And if you're commuting from Gig Harbor to Seattle, you also have the option to commute north to Bremerton and take the ferry, which might take a little bit longer, but it's a beautiful boat ride every morning, which some people really like.
Right. And then Bremerton's gotten a fast ferry, and so there's been some improvements and options there.
And then if you were commuting from Gig Harbor to downtown Tacoma, depending on where you are in the harbor, 30 minutes?
20. And again, it depends on where you're coming from. But I do usually tell people, for the most part, you can get just about anywhere in 20 minutes in Tacoma.
That's cool.
From most areas of the harbor because of just the freeway access. And even if it's going as far south as the mall, but because it's right off the freeway, it's really pretty quick and easy.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to explain the difference between living in Tacoma and living in Gig Harbor.
Thank you.